Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I want to talk about our full moon that is culminating here in Hawaii on Thursday morning at 8:41 a.m., I believe. And I'm going to just go ahead and share the screen with our chart for this full moon. So, yeah, it's at 8:40 a.m. here. So that would be 10:40 a.m. Pacific time. So we have our moon here in the star of Mula in Sagittarius, and we have our sun here in the star of Ardra in Gemini. And this axis, this placement in the sky of these two stars is on the galactic plane. It's considered to be one of the most tumultuous placements in the sky, both ends of it. The story of Ardra, where the sun is, I've actually talked about a little bit with the past couple cycles we've gone through, simply because we've had our planets in the stars preceding it. Rohini and Mrigasira, we see lead into Ardra, where we have the storm. This is the shoot down of Prajapati, of the creator, where Rudra, the howler, the aspect of Shiva that is made of anger, shoots down the creator in the sky because he is chasing after his daughter. And he's chasing after his daughter because he wanted to mate with her, to make perfect beings for Earth. And Rohini, where we see the North Node Rahu and Mercury is this perfect daughter. She's one of the 27 stars, the 27 nakshatras, and she's the most beautiful and the most fertile. And so he decides, okay, this is a great plan. I'm gonna mate with her and we'll have perfect beings on Earth. And she gets wind of the idea and turns herself into a deer in Mrigashira and takes off down to Earth to escape him. Meanwhile, the other deities are seeing what's happening, and they're not too keen on his idea either. And so they enlist Rudra to shoot him down. And this part of the sky is where Orion's belt is, and there's a similar hunter type story of Western origin in this area of the sky as well. So we can see the sun as our power, right? It's our sense of authority, the government, father, that patriarchal male figure. And in this placement in the sky, it shows both sides of that story, right? It shows the part where for sure there are entities, people, and individuals, as well as groups of people who, believe they have the best interest of another group of people or a community or a society or our whole society in interest, and that they, can manifest the ideal society if we just follow through with their value system. And perhaps not everyone agrees with that, or maybe the backs on which that will have to be made, or the person who will have to participate in this isn't doing that in free will and consensual nature. So they are fleeing from that, or in some way running from that situation. And this can be really specific. I mean, there's actual stories that have come up of sexual abuse and things like this that arise as stars pass through these 3 points. As planets pass through these 3 stars of Rohini, Mrigashira, and Ardra, we see these stories start to come out. And certainly the North Node has been from Mrigashira into Rohini for some time now. And so we've been seeing this come out more and more in the world, these kind of issues around sexual abuse. But certainly that's not the only kind of abuse of power and violation of humans and their, body autonomy or just their autonomy at all. And this sun being there indicates that there is both a holding of power as well as a visual capacity to see that things are not necessarily aligned for everyone, and that the choice that's being made or the decisions that are being made with maybe a good intention, But if it's not taking into account that the means do not justify the ends, then it will get shot down. It will get shot down by perhaps, a figure or again, an entity or a person or something that takes it upon themselves for this form of justice, this vigilante kind of justice, or it'll get shot down in another way. But one way or another, perfect things can't be created if they're stepping on other people, or if they're stepping on the rights of others. It can't be. You can't just override that. So that's one of the big lessons that I have more and more been taking away from this section of the sky. The story as it's told can come really, like, oh, they misunderstood his intentions. Intentions were really good, which I hear, but I also know that these stories get passed down in written form and have been passed down in written form, written by males in a society that was upholding power structures similar to this. So even if the intention is good, it doesn't necessarily mean that the ends justify the means. In fact, it usually does not mean that. And that's something to really understand, because in the world we're in right now, it's becoming an increasing problem where information, and this is Gemini, this is sidereal Gemini, this is where information is held. And information is increasingly not only manipulated, but it's also being guarded as something that a smaller group of people can understand or possibly assimilate, and the masses wouldn't be able to understand that. So we'll just make these decisions over here and then tell everyone else what to do, and they should just listen. And I think more and more people are finding fault with that, because that small group of individuals holding information has time and time again proven to not have the best interests of society at hand. Why would people trust that entity to make decisions for everyone else based on information we're not even really allowed to see? Or whatever we do see can be, manipulated and skewed. And so I think that's one of the issues that's coming up again and again and again, and will continue to come up. Certainly as Jupiter transits sidereal Aquarius, we can see this is definitely coming back up, meaning old information, old beliefs, old things we might have taken for granted, even rules and judgments that have been made can fall in this realm of Jupiter, where we're sort of running over old ground and questioning those things, questioning the beliefs that everything was founded on, and questioning the rightness of rules and order and ordinance that are being made. And Jupiter in Satabishak shows us that corruption. It shines the light on the corruption, and it shows where the underbelly of society is corrupt, but it also shows where the government, especially with Jupiter involved, where laws, government officials, and everything offshooting of that is corrupt. And if that's the premise for what we're making our decisions on, and how we're allocating power to people, how we're allowing people to have power, because remember that power is something we allow, right? No one can just really actually take power. Other people have to accept it. I could stand up and say, I'm ruler of the world today, but no one would listen to that. You need to actually have people listen and say, yes, yes, we agree, you're ruler of the world. And so all the power that's held in this world has actually been accepted by maybe a handful of people, and then a larger handful of people, and then it gets brought down lower and lower and lower. And one of the ways that things get accepted is through advertising. And when advertising is mingled with fact and information, it's called propaganda. It's when there's advertising for information and facts. So information and facts can be fudged or made to say a certain way, or whatever we need to do in order to get people to do what we want them to do, which is buy this thing if it's a product, or follow these rules if it's a government. And so we need to be aware of this dynamic and how it's unveiling, how it's unraveling, because it's retrograde. And Mercury is no longer retrograde for this full moon, but it's only a couple of days out, right? Mercury ended its retrograde period on the 22nd. And Jupiter begins retrograde on the 20th. So their crossover is just a couple days. So we go out of the period of maybe our information is sort of, backed up, or our phones aren't sending the text messages, we're not receiving our emails, the laptop's not working, whatever the different things are that happen in Mercury retrograde, that might be slowing down and coming to or speeding up, is a better way of putting it, and functioning a little better. But the Jupiterian themes are now the ones backing up and slowing down and going back over old ground. And so it's really important to realize where Mercury retrograde has its limits, because oftentimes lay people who are interested in astrology sort of blame Mercury retrograde for everything. It's all Mercury retrograde, the whole shebang of everything. Everything that goes wrong is that Mercury goes retrograde for 3 weeks at a time, and it happens 3 times a year. Saturn and Jupiter go retrograde for almost half a year, and it happens every year. And it's a long period of time where we're rethinking our commitments with Saturn, our beliefs with Jupiter. Time literally seems to halt with Saturn retrograde because time is already very slow with Saturn. And the capacity to really show up in honor of our commitments, rolling up our sleeves and doing the hard work, gets halted. And especially when Saturn's in its own sign in Saturn, in Capricorn, where we might have had a lot of intelligence operating with what commitments we made, that slowdown is not beneficial. With Jupiter being in Saturn's sign of Aquarius, the slowdown is actually a little bit better because it's not in as good of dignity. So there's an opportunity to really make sure that we're aligning with our beliefs, and that all the things that we understand, our teachers, our teachings, the wisdom we hold, as well as the rules and laws and justice that gets made, is actually really right and can hold on. It's a truth we can hold on to for longer than just this moment in time. And that's really important with Jupiter, to understand that here and now justice does not necessarily create justice in the future. And just like we say that ends don't always justify the means, it's an example of that. So we need to make sure there's integrity throughout everything that we are operating under, the principles, the beliefs, the very foundation of what we're operating under. And so while Mercury is now direct, it's also joined the North Node, right? So it's highly conjunct this erratic, magnifying node that really disperses information. When it's Mercury, it's really sending our information out in different directions and can really lose the initial intention. And Mercury is ruling this sun here. Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, ruling this sun. Jupiter is giving drishti, one-way gaze, to this sun in very close degrees, from 8 degrees to 918. So our beliefs are fueling our feelings about this power. And there's confusion about it because Mercury is joined to this North Node. And the information, it's like that game of telephone we played when we were little, and everyone whispers something, and by the time it gets to the last person, it's a totally different phrase than it started with. That can be the effect of Rahu and Mercury. And then we go to this moon that's full here in Sagittarius, which is Jupiter's sign. So we have the ruler of the moon retrograde, the ruler of the sun joined not Rahu, just finished retrograde, and the ruler of the moon just beginning retrograde. And it is in the star of Mula. And Mula is the other end of this tumultuous axis. In Ardra, the creator gets shot down, justice is served by this singular heroic figure who comes from anger. In Mula, we have a goddess. We have Nariti, who's related to Kali, and she is chaotic. She's not ruled. There's no one-pointed focus. There's no, bow and arrow or weapon to shoot. It is just a wild, untamed tornado-like energy that rips everything up from the roots and lays the ground to be just big gutted holes, gaping holes of nothingness where there once might have been things planted. And maybe the things that were planted were really beautiful, But in Mula, we're evaluating how much they actually serve the greater society. It's the start of moving into the signs that govern the universal realm, as opposed to just the interpersonal or the personal realm. So we see what's not working and we pull it up by the roots. But it's also got this angry, untamed energy. It's a lawlessness. It's a lack, there was a sort of a cohort of people behind Rudra, championing on his shooting down of Prajapati. With Mula, there's no origin other than the root itself, which is what Mula literally means in Sanskrit. It's the root. And the root itself, if it's not pure, if it's not right, if it's not just, then it needs to be ripped up also, right? If it's not founded on something solid, then everything we plant or build or create is going to have that shoddy foundation or that bad root bulb at the get-go, or the seed itself was something we don't actually want to grow, and now we have some kind of crazy tree we're not interested in tending, and that doesn't actually provide anything for anyone. Nariti is said to ride a donkey and carry her sword, and she's from the night black city. She's from the ink black city, and she is said to be the guardian of the Southeast, which is where pain and suffering occur. But she also has a counter element, which is called the blonde Nariti. And that's when we recognize that whatever we did plant wasn't necessarily going to work. And we have that capacity, that vision, and that acceptance of the fact that we might have to destroy everything that we've created in order to create something better. So with both Ardra and Mula, the destruction makes room for something to be created, something beautiful to be created. After Ardra comes Purnavasu, where we see Venuses, which I'll talk about in a minute. And that's where Aditi is born, the Earth Mother. So out of that destruction, out of that chaos, new life comes, and it has to start much slower. It's not going to be this, we're going to create beautiful beings with this one act. It's going to be a slower process. And in Mula, it's about really aligning with what is right, what is truth, and planting seeds that are fully made of that truth, so that whatever grows later isn't some monstrous, hideous thing that won't serve society at all. We want to grow herbs and vegetables and plants that will serve society. We want to build foundations that will grow buildings that will help people. We don't want to create everything on a foundation that is inherently flawed. And that's where the power of these two stars come from. But coming out of that eclipse mode, and especially having Mercury, our information and communication planet, still joined the North Node, we can see that there's been a lot of delusion and confusion. And so moving into this axis where there's so much tumult and so much anger and destruction available, we have to be really careful. We really have to tune into ourselves and be aware of what confirmation bias is at the root of what we believe and what we accept informationally and as truth. Because each of us has that. There is nobody who's not operating from a confirmation bias, despite what all the current propaganda implies, where it says these people are like this, these people are like that. That's a lot of othering and separation that's being created in order to create more of this confusion, more of this delusion. So more things can just keep going with whatever agendas lie behind that. But as individuals and as a society and as people who are of sane mind and really genuinely want to see the world move in a positive direction after all that we've just experienced in this last year, most people really want us to build new ways of doing things and create systems that work for all of us. And that will be the theme as Jupiter transits Aquarius. But unfortunately, Jupiter is going to go all the way back into Capricorn again before we make our way back into Aquarius. So Jupiter is going to be retrograde until October 17th. But he's going to, in September, actually dip back into Capricorn and then make his way back into Aquarius November 20th. So we have a period of time where we're going to be even going back so far as to where our beliefs were super steeped in fear and restriction and constriction. And it will take a while to get to the part where we're really building the society that we want to see and really being able to champion for that. So it's something to be aware of. These retrograde cycles take us back over old ground and make us relive experiences that we, might not be that interested in reliving in a lot of cases, but also pointing out to us places where we might have missed something in the first time around. So if you don't already know where Jupiter is in your chart, I do have a report that sends out. It's Jupiter in Aquarius for all 12 signs. So you can see where Aquarius is, what house it is for you. And so also what Jupiter rules for you, because that's a big factor as to what it's affecting in your life. If you're a Taurus, this is your 10th house. If you're a Gemini, this is your 9th house. If you're a Cancer, this is your 8th house, and so on. And then it also rules 2 different houses for you. So it's actually operating and functioning from a different perspective based on what your rising sign is. So it's really important to understand that when we're thinking about our own charts and how this affects us or our loved ones, the people in our lives. But societally, we can see as a whole, we'll be moving more towards creating new systems, new ways of doing things, and trying to make society more equitable and fair, and weeding out some of the corruption and trying to allow for ways that we can mitigate that corruption from even happening to begin with. So one of the other things I really want to talk about in this video, and I actually lost my voice last week. I was going to do an update on some of these issues sooner so that it didn't have to be all in one big full moon video, but I didn't have a voice. So I took that as a sign not to speak. But Venus has just now moved into Cancer, and you can see Mars has been here for a while. Mars is actually in debilitation in Cancer. So with Mars in Cancer, we have a tendency towards passive aggression. It's an emotional sign. It's a place where we want to be unconditionally loving. And Mars is a planet where we separate, where we become strong and disciplined and courageous through regular, everyday, structured action that we take to build our strength and our courage and our discipline. And when we have a channel somewhere where we can funnel that energy, then it transmutes from anger to action. And this is why Mars is exalted across the way from Cancer and Capricorn, because there's a clear goal. This is where we want to get. This is what we want to do. And Mars just chips away at it piece by piece by piece. In Cancer, there's not really a clear goal. The goal is just to feel good and to emote and to be unconditionally loving and to nurture and have these sort of mothering qualities. And Mars doesn't really know what to do with that. So it ends up being anger and passive aggression and emotional anger that comes in this very emotional way. It can also be a really strong time for a need to self-care, because we can overexert ourselves pretty quick in our attempts to try to find discipline for ourselves, because it can be so hard. We end up wearing ourselves out pretty quick. And especially with this Saturn drishti here, we can see that there's a conflict between the flight of Saturn and the fight of Mars. And, Saturn's in stronger dignity, even though it's retrograde. Mars is debilitated. So our fight is flimsy. It's emotional. It's not strong in itself. It's not contained. And the flight, the freeze syndrome, the fear of Saturn is more intact and more integral. So we can see that can kind of win in this battle. But we also see Saturn as something that's very dehydrating. It sucks the moisture out of something. And so having the Saturn drishti here can really elevate our need for water therapy, to be in water, to drink water, to just be as hydrated as possible, and to take a lot of rest as we can overexert ourselves emotionally. Everything gets so tied up. All of our actions get tied up in our emotions and everything else. And we're so worried about the way other people feel. And this is really accentuated with Venus here. So Venus being in Cancer is also adding to this problem, which is a new development because Venus just moved here. But Venus in Cancer is where we have a lot of trouble differentiating between unconditional love and conditional love. What we are giving in a love relationship, a romantic partnership, or a business partnership is a give and take. You give, I take, I give, you take. You do this, I do this. These are our mutual needs. And this is how we both together work to meet them. We compromise, but we don't over-compromise because then someone's needs aren't met. And then we're not getting then that mutual need on the table is not getting met. With Cancer, with the moon and the moon sign of Cancer, we're unconditionally loving as a mother to a child. I give, I give, I give, I expect nothing in return. So when we get confused with Venus in Cancer, we start to feel like our romantic relationships or our partnerships are like Cancer, are like that unconditional love that we are wanting to just mother and nurture and give, except for Venus never feels okay about that. If Venus isn't getting something in return and there's no return on that investment, it's not going to feel okay. It's not going to be mutual. The needs won't be met and the compromise isn't happening. One person is compromising, the other person isn't. That doesn't work. So this feeling of Venus in Cancer can be one of great victimization. It's a sign of a placement of victimization where we feel like, oh, I'm doing everything and no one cares. And then you just keep doing and doing. If you've ever met somebody like that, you know, maybe a mother whose children have gone off to college or whatever, but she's still continuing to do everything for her husband and cut up his sandwiches and do all this thing and complain he never does anything. But she's perpetuating that more and more and more by her own actions. Well, that is the Venus in Cancer. And having Mars there also creates a lot of drama because Venus and Mars together creates sexual tension, sexual energy. And because Mars isn't getting up and doing anything, right? There's no discipline taking place. There's no action taking place. There's no real self-care taking place where we take care of the things we need to do in order to live a better life. It is just this sort of, you know, flimsy self-care that just sort of nurtures our emotional state and brings our nervous system back to a state of calm. So this dynamic of Venus and Mars together, especially with Saturn right across the way retrograde, really asking you to question your commitments. So in relationships, this can be very challenging. We could have a lot of challenge here between communication being confusing and foreign and not making its way to the hearer the way it was intended, to our commitments being questioned. Saturn has a lot to do with relationships because they have the commitment that we made, the commitment we made to one another, whether it's a working relationship or a romantic one. And then having this drishti on this Venus Mars together where the tension is high, the sexual tension is high, the give and the take and giving too much and then feeling bad about it, not feeling, you know, being lazy, having trouble showing up and doing what you need to do in order to keep everybody happy, keep yourself flowing, keep your own needs met, then feeling it's the other person's fault, you're not disciplined enough. All of those things can come into play and cause, you know, really wreak a lot of havoc in relationships. So it's good to be aware of these different aspects and to really dial in to, you know, whatever level of discipline you can hold for yourself, but really that meditative state of just reconnecting with yourself and your truth as often as possible and noticing your own place in everything. So instead of immediately turning into victim mode, recognizing the ways in which maybe you're not holding your boundaries or you're not stating your boundaries at all, or you're, you know, making choices that are later something that you're regretting and you're having to dig yourself out of yet another hole that you've made, and really, really, really examining the beliefs upon which it's all founded. That is one of the primary things we have to do when the moon is in Sagittarius period, but especially in this full moon where it's really lighting up and it's this powerful axis that really shows us how destructive we can be and how destructive groupthink can be. And also the many ways in which destruction can be beneficial. And some things need to be destroyed. Some things need to be ripped out by the roots. Some things need to be shot down. if we're ever going to create the world we want to live in. So I hope this is helpful. You can leave a comment, you can share, you can like, subscribe to my YouTube or to my website at www.radhahomeyoga.com, and you can sign up for the newsletter and get some free reports right away. And I hope that you have a blessed full moon, and whatever it is you're destroying or ripping out by the roots, you are really aligned with your highest truth in that, and ready to lay new ground for what really will work for you and for all of us. So I wish you all the best. Namaste.